And then if you have any questions as I'm talking, please interrupt and we can talk about what you're interested in, because I have a lot of information and it's fun. I want to make sure that it's relevant in what you want to learn about. I am not positive I can see the chat. I don't want to touch anything because I'm screen sharing. I don't want to change anything. So Barbara, if there's something in the chat, just let me know, please.
I'll keep an eye out.
And my first question to everybody is I would like to know where you're coming from. I've sort of tailored this to Vermont and to Burlington, but I would love to know if there are people coming from other places. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of citizen science and then give kind of an overview about how you can participate. And then I am speaking to you today from the Birds of Vermont Museum. So we are focused on birds and natural history. So I am going to talk a little bit about two projects focused on natural history. The phrase citizen science, the word citizen in this way really means the global citizen. You don't have to belong or be a part or live in a town, a state, or a country to participate. You can participate from anywhere with projects all around the world. So we really are using the word citizen as a global citizen. It's also sometimes called neighborhood science and community science.
So just to give you a heads up, Erin, that we've got someone from Burlington and someone from Copake, New York.
Thanks. So take a minute and think to yourself, what's the difference between an observer and a scientist? So an observer, when I think about it, could be somebody who sees something, hears something, uses their senses to, experience something. And how does that differ to you than a scientist? I'm guessing there won't be any answers in the chat, so I'll just keep going. I like to think of it as a scientist is somebody who does all the things the observer does, but they also write it down, or they document it, or they photograph it, or they illustrate it. They somehow record the information. And that is what a citizen scientist does. The academic definition of a citizen scientist is scientific research conducted in whole or in part by amateur or non-professional scientists. But I like to say it's somebody who is curious, or it's somebody who is concerned. And so again, I'm going to ask you to write in the chat just something that you're curious about or something that you're concerned about. And if all goes well, we'll come back to that later. If people write in, I'll ask you about that in a minute, what they said.
I'll let you know. So we have someone who's concerned about climate change.
All right, well, we'll come back to that. Thank you for writing that. So a little history about citizen science. Thomas Jefferson was one of the first citizen scientists. This is obviously not Thomas Jefferson. This is Rita, who posed for me. So around 1800, Thomas Jefferson was very interested in weather. And supposedly his motivation was he wanted to prove that the weather in the New World was better than France's weather. I don't really know if that's true, but regardless of his motivation, his hope was to give somebody in every county in Virginia a ruler and a thermometer and have them record the weather and share it so that he could then go back and say how great the weather was. Another older citizen science project is the Christmas bird count. And again, I'd love to know in the chat if anyone has participated in the Christmas bird count. This project started in 1900. A man named Frank Chapman, he was noticing that on Christmas Day, people went out and they shot birds, and then they recorded how many birds they'd shot, and they compared, and whoever had the most birds killed won. And he thought, well, that's just not that great. So let's try something else. Let's go out and count birds. In 1900, there was 27 dedicated birders, and they were between Toronto, Ontario, and Pacific Grove, California. And they went out, they did 25 Christmas bird counts, and they counted 90 species of birds that day. So flash forward 120 years, these are all the places that people do Christmas bird counts. In 2020, there were over 81,000 people participated and over 42 million birds were counted. I don't know, does anybody say in the chat?
Yeah, there's been at least two people that have participated in it. Yeah.
Well, you're participating in the oldest running citizen science project. And so all of this data, especially over 120 years, has been really helpful in looking at bird trends, especially I know somebody said they're interested in climate change. It's been the backbone to some big research projects, including Audubon's climate change report. And a lot of this information is helping predict how birds are reacting to climate change.
I'll also mention that there is some interest in monarch butterflies, and in someone was reading today on iNaturalist about 45 species of ladybugs in Vermont.
Wonderful. We'll definitely talk about monarchs. So monarchs, the story of the monarchs is also a very interesting citizen science project. This picture here shows the life cycle with the egg, the caterpillar, the chrysalis, and the adult. But for many years, people didn't know where the adults went. And back in the 1940s, two Canadian scientists, they figured out how to put a tag on a monarch. So here is a picture of one of the tags. This tag is much more recent. But it was very slow going getting that information out. How do you get people to know about this project? So in the 1950s, one of the researchers put an article in a magazine and they got 12 volunteers to help them. And so they put tags on monarchs. And then the project continued to grow. And by 1972, there was about 600 volunteers putting tags on monarchs. Remember, they first asked this question in the 1940s. And it wasn't until 1976 did they find a tag butterfly in Cerro Pelon Mountains of Mexico. Tell them to get the word out and get the tags and to find that. But they found it because of citizen scientists. So when you think about these, oh wait, one more project real quickly. I'm from the Birds of Vermont Museum in Huntington, and the museum was started by Bob Spear, who was a birder in Vermont. And he wanted to put together this list of the birds of Vermont. And you can see when he put this together, this was published in 1962, he didn't even have a typewriter. He collected the information by going birding, by talking to birders, by collecting little scraps of paper with bird notes on it. And he was able to put together this checklist of birds. So when you think about these older citizen science projects, what did people need for them? They needed their eyes, their ears, binoculars, rulers, and you can see I have 2 telephones there because that's how people communicated, by telephone or through newspapers. But what do we have now? Another question for everyone is just take a look around where you're sitting. How many devices do you have that can communicate with somebody else or another machine? Like I know everybody has at least one because they're watching this presentation. But I bet a lot of you have more than one. And so when you think about the fact that we can go anywhere on the globe, and I'm here in Vermont, I can communicate in the exact same amount of time with somebody in Australia as I can with somebody next door. And not only can I communicate with them, I can send them a picture and I can tell them exactly where I am on Earth. And that kind of technology, that ability to spread information and share information is really what is bringing citizen science and the power of citizen science to the entire globe. And one thing about science, or one thing about, maybe, let me rephrase that. We talk a lot about political boundaries. We talk a lot about boundaries humans have put up. But we know from 2020 that those boundaries don't mean anything when it comes to weather, to climate, to disease, to birds, to insects. And so if we really want to study those things, we all need to work together and we all need to communicate together. Oh, and one other thing, little fun fact is I just looked this up today. So as of supposedly today, there are 3.8 billion smartphones being used on the planet right now, which is almost half of the people on Earth have a smartphone. And there are about 5.2 billion mobile phones. So we definitely have the capability to gather and share a lot of information. So if you want to help, how can you help? What are some things that you can do? So there's some things you can tag a butterfly. As I mentioned, you can play a game. You can take a survey. You can read through old files and digitize them. You can measure precipitation, or you can take a picture or video. So those are kind of the tasks that are asked of citizen scientists. But how do we get started? You want to help, you want to do something, but you don't know where to start. So I recommend you go to a website called scistarter.org. And I'm pretty sure, Barbara can correct me, I think they're helping sponsor this program. Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful site. Right at the front, they talk about what citizen science do, like using science to address local and global problems, discovering new worlds, advancing medical research. And you can go to their website, and the first, right at the front page, there's a place where it says Project Finder. So I'm going to try to do this. This may not work. Just bear with me for a second. Can you see that page?
I can see the Project Finder page, but I can't see the sign up page.
So what you can you see where?
Yeah, now I can. There it is. Now I can see the website.
So you can type in Burlington, Vermont, and scroll down, and it will say, oops, my internet might be a little too slow. So projects, so I clicked on only projects that, and that allows you to, I might want to do a project that can be done online. I might want to do something that has classroom materials. I can go up here and it says select a topic. Oh, I have a computer in. I will be right back.
Okay. So I guess while we're waiting for Erin to pop back, I could mention that we have that this particular program and the kits that we will be providing to help people participate in citizen science projects has been funded by a grant from the National Network of Medical Libraries. And they really kind of got us going in this direction, and we'll have approximately 125 kits to provide to the public to help them with a variety of different programs, project, citizen science projects. And the first one that will be coming out will be Ebird, and then we will be doing one for the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas. All right, Erin, back to you.
Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay.
So you can click on, I know you said somebody was interested in climate and weather. You can say where you're from. You can click and decide if you want to do them while you're at home, or if you want to go to a park or do the school. And then you can search, and then over here, it will bring up all the possible projects. So it's very easy to use. It's an absolutely great resource for anybody, an individual, a parent, a family. So I highly recommend everyone go play on that. And now I'm going to go back to the program. Okay, so apparently it doesn't quite work. Can you see that?
I can now. You're in the You're not in slide. There you are. Yeah, there you go.
So the other thing that SciStarter does is it has a featured projects page, and that's really nice to just get an idea of the type of projects. I had mentioned earlier that one of the things you can do is play a game. And so this one, the Stall Catchers, this is a really amazing story. They made this online game, and people look at actual blood vessels and they find blood vessels that show where the blood has stopped flowing. And I don't totally, that's really the extent of my knowledge, but somehow they're able to use the data of lots of people playing this game for their Alzheimer's research. And I heard of statistics like where a computer doing the same work could take a year, but 1,000 people playing it and do all the work in 2 or 3 months. So it's a really great example of how all of us working together can accomplish some pretty big goals. There used to be a Citizen Science Day, and it's a Citizen Science Month, and the entire month of April is that. So it's a great time to go out, and there are a lot of resources also on SciStarter about events going on around. I show this globe a few times in the talk because I just think that I really want to stress the importance and the strength of citizen science for being able to solve problems that face the entire globe. If you're interested in learning more, there's a professional organization called citizenscience.org. They have conferences. They also have a journal where you can go and look up more about some of the best practices, ethical issues, and other ways that you can really go deep into citizen science. And it's now, I think, in some schools, that can be your major. PBS put together 4 videos called The Crowd in the Cloud. I think they're accessible on their website. It's pretty interesting. There's some really great stories of different projects. And I just put that on here so you're aware of it, but also because of this quote at the bottom, where it says, "No longer is science only done by professionals in labs. No longer is data owned by just corporations and government." And I'll talk about that in a little bit about the importance of data being accessible. So citizen science can lead to a greater understanding, and it can lead to action. And when I say it can lead to action, what I mean by that is by collecting, say there's a lot of people are collecting water samples and they're finding out about pollution. By having that data in hand, it's easier to go to policymakers and say, this is what we're seeing. This is what we know is a problem. Let's all work together to change it. And again, the globe. So as I mentioned, I'm from the Birds of Vermont Museum. So there's 2 projects that we work with a lot, and one is called Ebird. And if you ever want to go into this in more depth, certainly give us a call. We're happy to talk for much longer just about Ebird. Ebird was launched in 2000. It's an online database of bird observations, providing scientists, researchers, and amateur naturalists with real-time data about bird distribution and abundance. It's the largest biodiversity-related citizen science project in the world, with more than 100 million bird sightings contributed each year. This map shows all the different places around the world where people have submitted eBird sightings from. And because of all these sightings, we're better able to understand the birds, where they are, how they move, and some of the threats that they face. So even if you don't want to join eBird and you don't feel comfortable submitting your sightings, you can still go to the website and learn about birds. So you can go to eBird and you can type in under Explore Species a bird you're interested in, or you can and just see what birds are around. So for example, say you live in Burlington and you want to go birding, but you don't know what birds might be around. You can type in like Perkins Pier, which is I think about half a mile from the library. And 114 species have been documented from Perkins Pier. To say you're just a beginning birder and you weren't sure even what birds to look for, this is a great resource to help you narrow down what you might see. You can go in a little more depth, and this bar chart is a little overwhelming, but what it is I put in still at Perkins Pier. I said, what birds could I see between March and May? And this, I don't know if you can see, it says 62 species plus 7 other taxa. So between March and May, so if you were to go down to Perkins Pier today, you have probably the possibility of seeing 62 different, sorry, you're not going to see 62 species, but if you were trying to learn the birds you could see, they're up to about 62 species. So it's a great resource just to learn about the birds in your area, or a great resource if you're traveling. So for example, I went to Iceland a few years ago, and I don't know the birds of Iceland. So I was able to do this. I typed in a place I was going in Iceland, and I typed in the date I was going, and I was able to see the likely birds I might see. And then I only had to learn those birds, not all the birds that could be seen in Iceland. Ebird also keeps track of your own record. So if you do decide to join Ebird and submit your checklist, it does keep track of your own sightings. There's a lot of science that has come about because of Ebird, because of these different studies. And there, if you go to Ebird, there's a whole place. This is just a screenshot from Ebird of some of the scientific papers and information that they have gathered. Try again to go out of the presentation and show you something online. Can you see this wood thrush abundance animation?
Yes.
Okay. So what this is within Ebird under their science category. This is one species, wood thrush. It's a bird that's a fairly common bird in Vermont. And the scientists have taken all the sightings that have been gathered from Ebird of the wood thrush, and they put them into this map. So a couple things when you're looking at it is it's going to go through the whole year. The darker blue, can you see my cursor?
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
darker blue is higher abundance, and then this is basically fewer birds there. So I'm going to hit play, but then I'm going to move it up a little bit so you can see the whole country. I'm just going to move that up. So that's the wood thrush and its migration, breeding, its migration again, and coming back down for the winter. So looking at this map, you know, keeping in mind that this only was made because thousands and thousands of people put wood thrush into their checklist. But when you're thinking about conservation and you imagine you only have a very limited amount of money to help the wood thrush, just looking at this map, where would you focus your energy? You can put your answer in the chat or. So for example, would you put your money into land in Missouri? So when I look at this,
Someone is saying
really,
the Mid-Atlantic North, the Northeast states, Central America, and where there's the densest areas of concentration.
absolutely. And I think that is so obvious when you can look at these kind of maps and really see those the dense concentration. So I think whoever wrote that is absolutely right. You want to focus your money, your limited conservation dollars in a place that's going to affect the most birds. And so certainly the the mid-Atlantic, right where they migrate along the Appalachian, and then down in Mexico and Central America where they winter. And so these kind of maps, which again are only created because of citizen scientists, they can really help focus and make the conservation dollars that we have more effective. Right, I'm going to go back out of this screen, but if you have any time, I highly recommend going to ebird.org because there's lots of maps like this for different species. So can you see the slideshow?
Yes.
All right, so the other project I'm going to talk about real briefly is iNaturalist. And again, I'd love to see in the chat if anybody does iNaturalist already.
Yep, we've got a couple people.
Oh, good. So iNaturalist was started as a project for in a grad school in 2008. I'm going to give them credit. It's the final project for Nate Agrin, Jessica Klein, and Kenichi Uda in 2008. And they, two of them, Nate and Kenichi, continued to work on it after they finished grad school. And in 2014, it merged with the California Academy of Sciences. And then in 2017, it became a joint initiative between the California Academy of Science and the National Geographic Society. It became very quickly understood what an amazing tool this was to help build, collect information, and also then hopefully bring about some good conservation decisions. So at the top, that highlighted in green where it says 71,308,000, that's how many observations have been put into iNaturalist at this point. So an observation, there's two ways that you can contribute to iNaturalist. The first is to do what they call an observation. So if you see something like, so for example, this flower, I saw a white turtle head, and luckily my phone tells me when and where I saw it. So I would upload that information. And the second part of it is people verify it. So if I mislabeled it, say I called that white turtle head a dandelion, that information wouldn't help anybody if it was inaccurate. So because with using crowdsourcing, other people log on and they either agree with me that it's a white turtle head, or they correct me and they tell me what it is. And that's fine. Like many times I often put the wrong label on, and that's why it's so great that there's so many people out there that can help. And you don't even have to label it if you don't know what it is. So in terms of the verifying the observations, so that picture of the frog there, I might say it's a green frog, but it's important for other people to agree with me and not in case I misidentified it and it's really a bullfrog, which in this case, it really is a green frog. So the nice thing about iNaturalist is if you aren't somebody who wants to go outside, or for some reason you can't go outside, maybe you're on a super boring webinar and you want to do something else, you can just hop right on iNaturalist and make observations and be helping. So in Vermont alone, Vermont apparently has a very high number of citizen scientists per capita. So, but in Vermont alone, there's been 594,000 observations that have been submitted. Gives you an idea of the diversity of our state. But like Ebird, you can search a little more. So I searched Burlington to see how many different species have been seen in Burlington, and almost 2,420 species have been seen just in Burlington. And then I did a little more, and I looked right around the library. And there aren't that many sightings for species that have been observed around the library. So no pressure to Barbara and Rebecca. And I know there's really beautiful trees right outside that have birds in them. I've heard there's cedar waxwings come to your trees every year. So there's a great opportunity to upload some sightings. So to join iNaturalist, you can just go to iNaturalist.org and it'll just follow the instructions to join. This looks a little bit cumbersome and scary, these screenshots, but it really isn't. Once you've signed up and logged in, you'll be brought to your dashboard, which is kind of the equivalent of your homepage. This is, again, this is a little overwhelming, but this is the information that you submit with your observation. But keep in mind, your phone is actually doing most of that. Mm-hmm. There's also an iNaturalist app, and it's very easy to use, although you can only do the observation part, you can't do the identifying part. So this was just a screenshot of me uploading bud of the willow tree. The one thing, because so many people are using iNaturalist now, when it comes to what did you see over here, there's enough artificial intelligence and enough knowledge that if you don't know what it is, it will give you the best guesses. So if you submit a flower and you're not sure what it is, it'll give you 4 or 5 choices or 10 choices, I think, of possible flowers that it could be, which is really nice for just in terms of learning. It is very important to have good photos. The one on the left is the one that I took a photo, but there are 3 possibilities of different caterpillars that it could be, and you can't tell from the photo, so nobody's going to be able to verify it. So it's not a piece of data that anybody can use. This is just a quick summary of iNaturalist. As you can see, it's every year more and more people are part of it and more people are entering data. And this, I know a lot of times people feel like, well, I'm going to do all this work, but who's actually going to use the information? And this is an overwhelming slide, but it's just to show that these are just papers that were published in 2020 and 2021 using data from iNaturalist. It also, like Ebird, it keeps track of your own sightings. So you can kind of see what you've seen. So within iNaturalist, there's a thing called projects, and I was trying to figure out how to explain this, but it's like, if you imagine, this might not be the best analogy, but if you imagine you go to the grocery store and you bring home 5 bags of groceries, they're all groceries. So in this case, they're all observations, but you put some of your groceries in the fruit bowl and some of your groceries in the condiment section and some of your groceries in the cupboard. And a project is essentially like that. It's taking just some of the data and it's allowing, so somebody's looking for moths. They don't have to sort through the 73 million observations. They can just find the moth observation. You've already helped them sort it by taking your observation and putting it into a project. And it's actually quite easy to do with the app. Although, again, I feel like this is a little overwhelming to talk about, but it does help. And so, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because there's a lot of projects that you might hear about, like the lady beetle project that you had mentioned, that you can submit your lady beetle sightings into iNaturalist, and then you can put them in the project, and then the researchers can get all of that information. So if you start using iNaturalist, you're also doing the lady beetle project. So there's many ways to learn about iNaturalist. Vermont Center for Eco Studies, they do a lot of citizen science projects, and they have on their website a number of recorded webinars about how to use iNaturalist. And then you can just look at YouTube. There's a lot of different ways both to know how to do the app or to know how to do it on your computer. So this again is a little overwhelming, but there's a lot of projects within Vermont and a lot of organizations that do citizen science, such as I mentioned, the Vermont Center for Eco Studies, Audubon Vermont, the Vermont Reptile and Amphibian Atlas, and eButterfly. But the thing to remember is a lot of them take their data from iNaturalist. So if you're using iNaturalist, your information can go to the Vermont Reptile and Amphibian Atlas or the Vermont Atlas of Life or the Lady Beetle Study. So you don't have to get overwhelmed by, oh, I want to do all these different projects, but I can't keep track of all of them. You can do them all through iNaturalist. It's a great tool.
We do have a question, Erin. If I've collected data in the past and have it in my iNaturalist, can I add it to a specific project after the fact?
Absolutely. So if you go back, let me just see if I have a page here. So if you go back to a specific sighting, so if you imagine all this was filled out, there's a place on that observation. You'd have to do this on your computer, not on the phone, where you can add additional information and you can add that sighting to the project. So there was, I think it was last year, there was a project that was looking at the phenology of flowers blooming. So they were asking people to go back to all of their flower sites, all of their flower observations. And it doesn't show it on here, but there was a place on your dashboard when looking at the observation when you can say it's either the flower was budding, it was completely open, or it's past blooming. And so you can adjust your sightings at any point. And the more information you put and the more you do that somebody could sort for something, the more useful that piece of data is. So if you're interested in phenology or climate change, and people have submitted pictures of their flowers when they're blooming, and you can look for one species and you can maybe look for, okay, this flower was blooming at this time this year and this other time a previous year. So the more information you add, the better it is for people who are studying some of these things. Did that answer the question?
I think so, but I'm not sure. Yes, thank you.
The other thing that you can do is, I mean, I have on my phone, I probably have 500 pictures of plants and animals and frogs that I still haven't uploaded, but I still can. Like there's no time frame. You can always add more information. And then early on in the talk, I mentioned of different ways you can help citizen science projects. And I mentioned digitizing old files. We have here at the museum, if anyone's interested in doing this, let me know. But we have journals of people who have gone through the woods and written down things like, oh, we saw the lady slippers blooming today. We saw this blooming. And that information, even though it's old, it's still really good information. And we're trying to get that into some of these databases because that also tells us a lot about phenology because there's often a date and a location and when a flower was blooming. So finally, I just want to kind of reiterate, and this is again for projects, especially natural history projects. The first thing is just go out and observe what you see or hear and record it. And then finally, just share it. Share it however you can through iNaturalist or Ebird or the Reptile and Amphibian Atlas, or again, go to SciStarter and find a project of anything that you're interested in. So thank you. And then if you have questions about birds, come visit us at the Birds of Vermont Museum.
Thank you, Erin. If there are any questions for Erin, you can pop those in the chat. I'd be happy to ask her for you.
We do bird walks here at the museum, and we often do submit them to Ebird. So if you're ever interested in coming on a bird walk and kind of seeing how we submit the information, sometimes the hardest thing is just getting started, feeling overwhelmed by an app or by a website. And once you see somebody doing it, it often makes it a little bit easier.
Does the museum have an iNaturalist project set up?
We actually don't, and we have talked about it, and we have sorted the information by our location. so we can see all the information that people have put in. And we had one of our interns, that was their project, was just to go out and record as much as they could see. But I know a lot of places, a lot of towns, like I live in a small town, and they have a project and all the information is collected with the hopes that the Conservation Commission can use that information and all of that data when deciding about development projects. And then I know a lot of schools have specific projects for data that the students have collected on site. And you can design your own project if you'd like.
Heather Fitzgerald says thank you, and that she missed. Then she says we miss you. And Glenn says, do you know of local talks by scientists who are using citizen science in their research and publication?
So Vermont Center for Eco Studies does a lot of different citizen science, and they do a lot of talks. The Vermont beetle talk that you were just talking about, I'm sorry, the lady beetle that you were talking about, that's a big project. And Julia, who is coordinating the project, she will speak to organizations and is happy to do a webinar about that. She did one for the museum in Audubon a couple weeks ago, and she goes over why it's important to be looking for these beetles and how you can participate. She talks quite a bit about iNaturalist. They're also doing a bee survey. And so I think you can actually look at their website and see a lot of webinars about that. We do talks like this about generally about citizen science, but we also do a specific talk about Ebird, where we talk a lot more about what you can do with that and how you can collect the data and sort of other ways to collect even more data. I think North Branch Nature Center, they're doing a lot right now with amphibian crossings. I don't know if they have, I would have to imagine if you looked at their website, they have a talk about that. And then Jim Andrews with the Vermont Reptile and Amphibian Atlas, he will do talks about amphibians and reptiles. I mean, we're really lucky in Vermont. There's so many fabulous conservation organizations that just want to spread the word about all of our amazing wildlife.
I'll also mention that the library is going to be hosting a few of these talks over the summer as part of our summer learning challenge. We're focusing a lot on citizen science projects, and we'll have someone from VINS is going to be coming on June 23rd, talk about raptors. And we'll have other representatives of organizations that have citizen science projects. And we'll be bringing in more people throughout the summer. And that information will be on our website and also through our newsletter. And I will say that there seems to be a real uptick in the interest of scientists in how libraries can collaborate with their projects. And I will be giving, I'm doing a talk with another scientist at the Arizona State University, one of their community or citizen science conferences, and SciStarter and the National Network of Medical Libraries are all really trying to forge connections between libraries and scientists. So there'll be more coming through our library and other libraries in the area. And I'll also mention here that Rebecca says, thank you so much, Erin. Excited to be encouraging our library patrons to become community scientists.
I think one thing that's so great about a lot of these projects and a lot of the information that's out there is it's all ages and all abilities and all around the globe. And I think there's so few opportunities where you can be working. You know, I could be working with a kid in New Zealand on the same project. And, that's really fantastic. And my dad, who's in his mid 70s, can do just as much from his house. And I think that's a place that we've never been in our time. And that's kind of exciting. And just one more quick thing, we've really talked a lot about the natural history projects because that's what we know the most about. But there are some really amazing projects in terms of space and in terms of medicine that are out there. And some of that information is on the SciStarter website. And SciStarter also has a podcast, and they have the last 2 episodes were about libraries and citizen science, but there's also they talk to a lot of different people coordinating different projects. And it's kind of exciting to hear the different projects that are out there.
Well, without any other questions, we all want to say thank you very much, Erin, for your time today and getting us started as community scientists. And I suspect there'll be more to come, and do keep an eye out for those citizen science kits that are coming out. They'll have all kinds of fun things in them, like binoculars and magnifiers and all kinds of stuff. So keep an eye out. And yes, and definitely visit the museum this summer. There are people that are really interested in doing that.
Great, thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Happy Earth Day, everyone.
Earth Day.